Hello, 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 everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Flight Simmers. This is Viber Strike 95. Happy Friday, everyone, and I hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. Today, we're here in Wisconsin. Today, we're in Door County in beautiful Wisconsin. And today, we're here to do our next Game Day Fight series. And we're here to do our next Game Day Fight series. It's one of the most important matchups in American football. It's the NFL's oldest rivalry, the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears. Legendary American football rivalry has been around since 1920. And this rivalry has featured two of the most historic franchises. The first one, the Chicago Bears, being the founders of the league, known for their legendary and iconic players. Other being, of course, the Green Bay Packers, very famous for, of course, the Lombardi Trophy and many of the legendary quarterbacks over the years. So I hope you're all doing well here today as well for this stream. Should be about a 2-hour flight. Before we get started, I do want to say hello to everyone in chat and the mods and lurkers. Morning to you all. I hope you're all having a good morning as well. So here's our flight plan for this afternoon stream here. We're going to take off here from Washington Island. From there, we'll head up across the Door County, fly our way through Sturgeon Bay, get our way down to Green Bay, Wisconsin, of course. Visit the home of the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. Then we'll continue on our way to our first stop here at Appleton Airport, Kilo Alpha Tango Whiskey. From there, we'll head down through Oshkosh and then make our way to Milwaukee, the largest city in the state, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We'll make a stop here at Milwaukee Mitchell. Then for our third and last leg, we'll go our way through into Illinois. We go into the Chicago area, fly over Evanston, Wrigley Field, and then make our way to the current home of the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field, and we'll make the landing at Meigs Field. So we should get a pretty good scene here in Chicago. We should be having some good flying here today. We should have some good flying here for this afternoon stream. We'll take the Cessna 172 today. I thought this would be a really nice plane, and I think it would be perfectly good to take a flight in the Cessna 172. So we're going to go ahead and power up, alternator, battery on. And on. So we don't really need to have to fly super high. 2,500 feet is our max altitude for this stream, but we're going to just fly. We're going to fly around 1,500 feet for the first leg. Is 1,500 feet. You don't really need to fly very high. So this is Washington Island. So we got the plan for this weekend. So ultimately, there wasn't really many choices this week. So there wasn't really too many big games this week, of course. I'm looking back at my game day documents. I made a document about this. So the Bears and Packers was definitely the more likely game this week. The only other games this week that would have been so interesting for general aviation would have been, I would have picked Club Brugge and Ghent, and Leipzig versus Leverkusen, but I ultimately decided to choose this game today. I thought this would be very appropriate. Head. 206. And we're up. And here we're heading. Going to go. Heading, and we're going to climb up 500 feet a minute. And we'll go. There you go. We're off here in beautiful Wisconsin. We're here in beautiful Wisconsin, so we'll be taking off here for our game day flight here. Also, this week, by the way, for our streams, we'll be back Sunday. We'll be doing Denali National Park in Alaska. You guys would all really enjoy that one. You get to visit North America's tallest peak, Denali. This will also be for the first time. We'll probably not take a traditional bush plane. We'll be taking the PC-6 for that trip, the Plus PC-6. So we'll do some really cool landings. We'll also be landing on the glacier. So we'll do glacier landings. We'll be doing all sorts of stuff with the Plus PC. So I think you guys are gonna really enjoy it. So let's go ahead and talk about the Packers and Bears rivalry for a bit. This legendary NFL clash has been dating back to 1921 exactly. And the Packers joined the American Professional Football Association, and they played against each other every single season except for 2 seasons, 1922 and oddly enough 1982. Where the first time the Bears and Packers didn't really meet. But this legendary rivalry is the most played matchup in not only the two of the oldest teams in the league, it's the league's most played matchup. They met 210 times actually. And both franchises rank among the top 5 in the NFL for all-time win-loss records, as well as both holding the record for the most wins in league history. Though nowadays it's the Packers who have the most wins in NFL history. And both franchises have a combined 77 inductees to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 41 of those from Chicago, 36 from Green Bay, and have secured 22 NFL championships, as well as combined for 5 Super Bowl titles. This is, like I said, these two are very historically very significant and successful teams. As of right now, the Packers lead the rivalries 109-96 with 6 ties. They've also met twice in the playoffs, and they split that as well. The 2 times they met was in 1941 and 2010. 2 years they met in playoffs. So, about this interesting rivalry, of course, in this legendary NFL clash, 2 legendary club teams. The background of this rivalry, you see the Bears originated back in 1990 as the Decatur Stanleys. They were a works team, which is a company team of the AE Manufacturing Company. And they transitioned to professional status in 1920 and became a charter member of the American Professional Football Association, which later evolved into the NFL within the same year. And in 1921, the team then relocated from Decatur, Illinois to Chicago, which they've still remained ever since, and adopted the Bears name the next season, which is still here to this day. The Packers, however, were established back in 1919, the same year, and they were part of another company team, but this time the Packing Company. And then later became the Acme Packing Company, and they became a member of the APFA in 1921. So, yes, these two were both company teams, actually, from this part of the country, of course. So while there isn't much in the history thing from what I looked at, there are notable games over the years. I picked some of the most notable ones from the 1920s to 50s. 2 of the matches I picked was the very first meet between the two in 1921 on November 7th. The organization played for the first time ever, when the Bears were named the Staleys. And the Staleys won that game 20-0. The first touchdown was scored by Gaylord Stinchcomb. The Bears shut out the Packers 20-0. The Staleys later changed their team name to the Bears a year later. And then there was one from 1941. The Bears actually came into the game undefeated. In their first 5 games, they defeated their rivals by an unprecedented 157 points. However, the Packers upset them in this game, which was the Bears' lone defeat that year. And apparently, the game, the Chicago Bears myth is broken. Fans made accusations that the game was fixed as a result. But of course, this one right here is December 14th. The Bears met the Packers for the first ever playoff meet between the two back in 1941. It was the first playoff meeting between the two. The Bears defeated the Packers 33-14 in a one-game playoff to determine the NFC Western Division Championship. After the Packers, the Bears later defeat the New York Giants to win their 4th NFL championship. And this was their lone playoff meeting until 2010. As well. Then from the 60s and 70s, one notable matchup is in 1963, November 17th. The Bears and Packers both met with 8-1 records, met at Wrigley Field to their first place in the Western Conference. Chicago built behind dominant defense, got a 26-0 lead, and held on to win 26-7 to complete the sweep of the Packers in the 1963. In 1964, just a year after the events, the free kick game happened. Due to the fact the Packers invoked the surprisingly fair catch rule, which allows for a place or drop kick field goal from the spot of the fair catch. Yes, it is a pretty peculiar, weird rule. It's a fair catch kick, which was a rule back in the old time, and it completely surprised both teams. And the Packers lined up, and Paul Horney made a 52-yard field goal, and the Packers stunned everyone in attendance, and the Packers won the game 23-12. Then from the 1980s, of course, there are 3 of them I picked. Of course, one very notable night on October 21st, 1985, the world was introduced to then rookie defensive lineman William Perry, aka the Refrigerator. Perry led the way for Bears legend Walter Payton on 2 and 1-yard touchdown runs. And then, during the second quarter, the Fridge was given the ball and plunged the end zone for one of the heaviest touchdowns in NFL history at the time. The Bears won 23-7, and the legend of the Fridge was born. Now, by the way, if you don't know about William Perry, of course, he weighed, during his NFL information, he weighed 330 pounds. That's a lot of weight. He ran almost 350 pounds. I mean, imagine that guy trying to tackle that kind of guy. He's as a fullback. Absolutely massive individual. Then in 1989, on November 6, 1989, there was the game known as the replay game. Packers quarterback Dan Majkowski led the Packers to a comeback with an apparent game-winning touchdown pass to Sterling Sharp. Play was then called a touchdown, but line judge Jim Clark called a penalty on Majkowski for going beyond scrimmage when he threw the pass. A nervous crowd at Lambeau waited for the call as it went up to the play official. Several minutes later, the call came down and the touchdown was awarded by instant replay, allowing the Packers to beat the Bears for the first time at that point since 1984. And what it later did was change the rule in the illegal forward passing rule. So it changed actually a major rule. In the 1990s, which was the start of the Packers' dominance, in 1995, of course, the Packers, a win would get the Packers same records as the Bears during that time in the NFC Central. And in the end, not only did Favre start, he had the best game of the season at point, completing 336 yards and 5 touchdowns as the Packers knock out the Bears. And in 1999, of course, November 7th, the Bears beat the Packers for the first time since 1983 on a blocked field goal by defensive tackle Brian Robinson, and was the first game of the series played after the death of Walter Payton. During the 2000s, of course, on September 10th, 2006, in the opening week of the season, the Bears handed Brett Favre his first shutout in his 16th year as the Packers couldn't score. The Bears shut them out 26-0. The Bears' offense, being criticized for being conservative, opened the game with a 49-yard touchdown pass to Bernard Berriman. It continued ever since. This was also the first game in which Devin Hester returned a punt for a touchdown. And then on December 22nd, 2008, the coldest game in recorded Bears history happened with a kickoff at 2 degrees with a negative 13 degrees wind chill. In the end, the Bears ended up defeating the Packers 20-17 thanks to a Robbie Gould field goal in overtime. In 2011, on January 2nd, the 9-6 Packers hosted the 11-4 Bears in a must-win game for the playoffs. The Bears had already locked up by. Coach Lovie Smith played for all his stars to try and prevent the Packers from making the playoffs. In the end, it didn't really matter, of course. The Packers beat the game 10-3, and the Packers made their way to the. And unfortunately for Bears fans, this wasn't a good thing because they met a couple months later and knocked out the Bears and talked about that. Then December 29, 2013, in the game which NFC North Championship was on the line, the Packers and Bears faced off against each other, and it proved to be an absolutely close game. But the Packers won 33-28. And then on September 5th, 2019, it was the 100th season of the NFL. And of course, this was also the Bears' 100th season in the league. So the NFL paid a tribute to the matchup by playing the first game of the season Thursday with the Bears and Packers. And of course, the Packers won that game 10-3. A 10-3 game. Of course, and finally for the 2020s, the Bears and Packers entered the game with the most wins all time. The Packers came away with a crucial win in 2019 to take the all-time win lead from the Bears, who've held it since 1921. In 2024, the Packers and Bears met again. The Bears were trailing 2019. However, place kicker Scar Santos was blocked, preventing the Bears from getting the win. And of course, next season, January 5th, later in the year, they did a similar situation, but this time the Bears actually did get the field goal this time around. And Scar Santos got the win for the Chicago Bears. But the win ended up being pretty meaningless, of course. Bears. So that concludes some of the memorable matchups between the Bears and Packers, at least for the regular season. But basically, these two are relatively close. I mean, these, according to the all-time matchup stuff, it's relatively close. So it goes through and through. One final thing I do want to bring up here as well, of course. Talk about some of the more important stuff in the league. The thing about the rivalry, though, that's really important between the Bears and Packers is, well, the legends, of course. Both these franchises have had legendary coaches over the years. If you're a Green Bay Packers fan, you probably all know about a guy named Vince Lombardi. His namesake of the Lombardi Trophy. His namesake. But they also had Curly Lambeau as well, who was a big part of much of the early years of the Packers. You also had Mike Holmgren, who was also the coach of the Seahawks, but Mike Holmgren was an incredibly successful coach during his time in Green Bay, and more recently, Mike McCarthy won a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. So lots of legendary coaches with the Packers. Now, Bears fans, they definitely have a few iconic coaches. Most notably, George Halas, who is also both the player and the founder of the Bears and the founder of the NFL. You guys had great George Halas. But you also have some other well-known coaches over the years too. Of course, you had Mike Ditka for over a decade. Had Mike Ditka as a coach, two-time coach of the year, and won the Super Bowl in 1985 with one of the most dominant defenses ever. The '85 Bears was just legendary defensive team. Of course, you also had Lovie Smith, who's had a really successful tenure. Was coach of the year. He even got to be in the Super Bowl. He didn't win it, of course. Peyton Manning got in the way of that. But Lovie Smith was definitely a very successful coach for the Chicago Bears. I know this year Ben Johnson's been really great this year, and the Bears finally get some good successful coaching. Bears as a franchise has been long looking for that. Definitely pretty interesting, to say for the least this year, of course. Also, by the way, coming into this year's matchup, of course, this week, um, both the Bears and Packers are among the two top teams of the NFC North. Early right now, the Bears technically have the better record. Look at the standings, of course. You can see the Chicago Bears lead NFC North, the 10-4 record, and the Packers are second. So right now, the Bears are the number 2 seed, I believe. But Chicago's playing really great this year. Ben Johnson's absolutely worked out great for the Bears. You couldn't ask for a better first year for the team. They definitely needed it. So yeah, the Bears are playing really well this year. It's been the best season the Bears have had in quite some time. Caleb Williams has actually played really well this year. Caleb Williams has actually played quite good this year. I know his completion stats aren't the greatest, but 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That's pretty solid for Caleb. Hey, he's getting the team to wins, and I think that's really important for. Honestly, the Bears are doing quite well. The Packers are off to a good start this year. But the craziest part though is that is just the fact the Bears are actually this good this year. Maybe the Bears could sneak a run to a Super Bowl again. But yeah, it's good time for being a Chicago Bears fan. Let's go ahead and let's get to our next part of the slideshow course. So they did meet in the playoffs once in 1941. I think I talked about this a little earlier ago. But both teams arrived with 10-1 records and tied of the Western Division title. Ties were broken with the playoff game, and the Bears won at 33-14, which I've already talked about. But there was one other meeting, and that was in 2010, and they met in the NFC Championship. This was one of the biggest have made it to. It is one of the biggest games in the rivalry's history. Was back in 2010. This was the biggest game in the rivalry's history. And it was definitely a classic game. Packers started off with a 14-0 lead with Aaron Rodgers. Jay Cutler was injured late in the second quarter. Todd Collins wasn't very effective. Bears then got Caleb Heine into the game, and the Bears would make it 14-7. Raj got a pick six to make it 21-7. Then, of course, the Bears answered with another touchdown. And unfortunately for Bears fans, Caleb Heine threw his second interception to Sam Shields to send the Packers to end the game and send Green Bay to another Super Bowl. They beat the Steelers later on that year. And for Bears fans, this was definitely a very rough memory for Chicago Bears fans. Definitely one Bears fans would want to forget, for sure. Or Chicago Bears fans. Definitely not. It definitely did not go to plan. You're a Chicago Bears fan. Of course. So that covers a bit about the rivalry with the league, of course. I hope you guys enjoyed the notes for this part. We'll get to talk about the Packers pretty shortly. But before we do talk about Green Bay and the Packers, of course. Being that one of the better ones as well. So, in terms of the rest of the NFL stuff, last night was absolutely crazy, though. The Seahawks and Rams game was absolutely huge. Between the two of the best teams in the league this season, mind you, it was a great game. But when it's all said and done, it was the Seahawks that won the game in overtime, 38 to 36. But it was a massive win for Seattle, and probably could very well help them clinch the division. But very big game and had a lot on the line. But last week was pretty crazy. The biggest being, of course, was the Chiefs lost last week. Yes, the Kansas City Chiefs lost last week. This is the first time the Chiefs have missed the playoffs since 2014, I believe. Yeah, they're missing the playoffs for the first time since 2014. It had 10 straight playoff appearances and 7 straight AFC Championship berths. It's over. The Chiefs don't even make the playoffs. Which is actually pretty exciting, though, because how the thing about it is, if you look at the playoff picture, um, this is interesting because the playoff picture looks pretty chaotic right now. Without the Chiefs, um, the AFC playoff spot, we know that the Broncos already clinched it. So likely, if the playoff picture ends today, I think it would be the Broncos, Patriots, Jaguars, Steelers, Chargers, Bills. Um, it would probably be those 6 teams. And then for the NFC, we already got the Seahawks and Rams are probably the Bears, Bills, then the Buccaneers probably win the South. Then your choice of Packers or Niners. I'm going to say the Packers probably maybe more likely. And probably the Niners. Especially if the Bears beat Green Bay this week, then the Bears pretty much secure the North. Then for the Super Bowl, well, if I had to be that man for this year's Super Bowl matchup, I'm going to probably say it's Broncos versus. I think it's going to be Denver versus Seattle. Yeah, who saw that one coming? Probably no one did. Started. And who do I think wins? I think Denver finally gets payback for what happened all those years ago with Peyton. Yeah, imagine how miserable Chiefs fans are going to be when the Halls miss the playoffs and see their hated rival Denver win. That would be pretty humbling. So let's go ahead and get ready to talk about the Green Bay Packers, of course. That's why we're officially here. Um, the Green Bay Packers will be our first discussion point for this week. We'll get ready for the Packers. Now, I hope you guys enjoy. You all have a good plan for this weekend, of course. If you all have any really neat plans this weekend. For me, well, I got the PMDG 737, so I'm going to probably do some flying around in the 737. Get myself reacclimated back into the airliner again. They just released it last night. I managed to get it, though. Looking forward to doing some more PMGG flying. Two-Tone Murphy will be back later today. He'll be doing another one of his streams again. And he'll be doing another Honored Christmas challenge. He's going to do from Roswell to Coruna to Ivalo. He'll be doing another part of the Christmas challenge. He'll be taking another one as well. So he'll be doing that on later today. On Saturday, Allison Johnson's going to be back. She'll be doing another one of her flights of the Jennifer Murray series. Going from Nassau, she'll make her way up to Bravo, Papa, India, and then later on to Charleston International. So she'll be going through to there. So definitely check out Allison Johnson, great friend of the channel. So, oh, wait, oh, she's going from Nassau to Palm Beach to Charleston. So that's where she's going. Definitely check her out. Great friend of the community, a wonderful friend. In terms of other sports this week, in terms of other teams this week, sports, Everton will be playing tomorrow, of course, for my sports. Everton are going to be back tomorrow. They're going to be playing Arsenal. They're going to be playing against Arsenal, which I'm not looking forward to that. Consider how bad Chelsea beat the Toffees. I can't even imagine how badly do I think Arsenal's going to beat Everton. At least the Toffees are at home. Um, in terms of some of the other teams I follow, of course, Liverpool playing Spurs also as well for you Liverpool fans. Um, of course, my Spanish club actually plays on Monday against Athletic Club, which we already visited in, by the way. So it'd be pretty important. And of course, the Colts don't play this Sunday. They're having a week. They're having their week off this week, so no Colts game. That's what's going on for this week in sports, of course. Um, let's go ahead and talk about the Green Bay Packers while we're here. So here it is, guys. The Packers, baby, pack. Green Bay Packers, they're one of the NFL's oldest franchises, dating all the way back to 1919. However, they're not only the NFL's third oldest franchise, they are extremely unique among American sports. You see, they're the only nonprofit community-owned major league team in the country. Yes, you've heard that right. Community-owned professional sports team. This makes the Packers extremely unique here in the United States. You see, every other team that's owned here, US of A, by the way, is owned by is privately owned by like mainly rich people. However, the Packers are unique because, of course, they're the only one of those owned by the top four leagues. And they have been fan owned since 1923. Currently, the NFL bans such an ownership structure. However, the Packers have been fan owned for so long, it's been grandfathered into the whole thing. Of course, the other teams are fan owned here in the North American League, and in the major leagues are the Saskatchewan Roughriders, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, of course, of the Canadian Football League. Some of the minor league hockey teams across Canada are also fan owned. But there's a lot more of these fan owned stuff in other countries. Mainly, of course, in England. Mainly, you see a lot more of these in Europe. Most notably, in terms of European fan owned clubs, parts of Midlothian, Scotland, that's a very big one. Of course, Real Madrid and Barcelona are fan owned. Um, FC Barcelona, Real Madrid, Athletic Club, and Osasuna are major fan owned clubs here in Spain. Some of these are absolutely enormous teams, of course. And of course, in every single major German club is owned by mainly by the majority of fans due to a rule. But it's very rare in American sport. So that's why I wanted to bring it. Since 1957, they've been playing their games at the historic Lambeau Field, currently the oldest stadium still used in the entire league. They held the most record wins in NFL history. And they're the last of the small town teams that used to be common in the NFL during the 20s and 30s. Founded by Early Lambeau in 1919. And of course, the Packers are one of the NFL's most successful franchises. 13 league championships, not with 9 pre-Super Bowls, NFL titles, and 4 Super Bowl victories. In fact, the Packers were the team that won the first 2 Super Bowls in 1960 and 1967, led by, of course, Vince Lombardi, one of the greatest coaches ever. In fact, he's so iconic, the trophy was named after him. Of course, the Packers have also had many legendary rivalries with the NFC North, mainly with the Bears, Vikings, and Lions. So, definitely an iconic major NFL franchise. Of course, if I were to talk about the history of the Packers, I would go on all day because the Packers are just stuffed with history. Of course, when we talk about the Green Bay Packers, I have to talk about the community ownership because the Packers are extremely unique, being the only community-owned franchise in North America's 4 traditional sports leagues. Rather than the property of an individual, partnership, or corporate entity, they are held by stockholders more than 537,000 as total as of 2022. Now, no one person is allowed to hold more than 200,000 shares of the franchise. This broadleague piece can be supported, not product structure, which actually kept this team in Green Bay, Wisconsin, for nearly a century. For over a century, despite this being by far and away the smallest major city, is the smallest market in North American sports. You see, Green Bay only has a population of 107,000 people and 600,000 for TV. However, due to its massive fan base across Wisconsin and the Midwest, the Packers are entirely here in Green Bay. As of 2021, there are 6 stock sales to fund the Packer operations through the team's history. And the NFL and the Packers are still the only team with this form of ownership in the NFL, which does not comply with league rules, stipulating a maximum of 32 owners per team, with one holding a minimum 30% stake. So it was grandfathered into this whole thing in the 1980s. Now, of course, the board of directors, Green Bay Packers Incorporated, is governed by a 7-member executive committee from a 45-member board of directors. It consists of president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and 3 members at large. They include corporate management, capital expenditures, broad policy, and management performance. Definitely very important, but yes, the Packers are fan-owned. This is something extremely unique to only the Packers. That's why the Packers are definitely one of North America's most unique franchises. And historic, too. Well, we're just arrived here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. We're just arrived here. I'm going to take a break from the notes as we're here in beautiful Green Bay, Wisconsin. So as we arrive into Green Bay, of course, and to talk about the Packers, the city of Green Bay, Wisconsin is definitely very interesting. For one, this city has a population of 107,000. It's the 3rd most populous city here in the state. Settled in 1634 by John Nicolet, a fur trading post. And mainly encompasses healthcare, manufacturing, and several sectors. And of course, most people know the city for where the Packers originated from. But you see, Green Bay was historically been very important, mainly for its industry. It used to be the toilet paper capital of the world due to the fact of the paper industry. And also packing companies were huge, and that's actually how the Packers got their name, is because Green Bay was a major packing town for a lot of packing stuff. Nowadays, healthcare and services are now the biggest provider here in. Here it is, guys. Green Bay, Wisconsin. This here is the city of Green Bay. Yeah, it doesn't look like much, obviously. We've been to a lot of cities, of course, but nothing like this. You can see all the industry stuff here in Wisconsin. So all the factories and stuff and packing. This is That's Green Bay for you. We're going to actually head on down to Lambeau Field, the oldest stadium in the NFL. So we're going to go ahead and turn off our autopilot just briefly. So this here is Lambeau, the oldest stadium in the NFL. Now, of course, also one of the largest stadiums in the league. Of course, we know Green Bay has around 107,000 people. The stadium is 81,000. So basically, it's about 20,000 people less than the city of Green Bay, Wisconsin itself. Of course, so if it looks like here, it doesn't look like there's actually much snow. It's covered in snow as we speak, which this region can definitely get lots and lots of snow. So this here is beautiful. Um, it, and of course, you can take tours to visit Lambeau, by the way, Lambeau Field. The There's a couple other facilities here too. Um, the Resch Center, the Don Hudson Center, other arenas here, but of course, there's beautiful Lambeau. Of course, the Packers are incredibly. So we're firing back up, of course. So we're going to be talking about the Packers here for a bit. That was Lambeau Field, home with the Packers, of course. One interesting thing about the Packers, of course, rivaling its fan infrastructure, of course, we have to talk about the Green Bay Packers fan rivaling its fan ownership is its absolutely massive fan base, of course. Yes, the Packers are exceptionally very loyal. Regardless of team performance, every game played in Green Bay has been sold out since 1960. Yes, it is an absolute tradition religion here in the Packers. You see, despite having the smallest TV market, the Packers are one of the most popular teams in the NFL. They also have one of the longest season ticket waiting lists in professional sports. 140,000 names long, more than their seats at Lambeau Field. Of course, but the average wait is said to be over 30 years, but with 90 or so tickets turned over annually, it would be 955 years before the next newest name on the list got their season tickets. So season tickets are usually willed to the next of kin, and newborns are placed optimistically on the wait list to get season tickets. Yes. You don't have to wait that long to get season tickets for the Packers. Crazy, isn't it? Of course, Packer fans were known as the Cheeseheads. They're actually nicknamed for Wisconsin residents, by the way, thanks to the state's bountiful cheese production. It was first levied as an insult between the White Sox and Brewers. However, instead of an insult, it became a source of pride in the state, and especially as embraced since 1994 by Packer fans. You always see the bright yellow-orange cheesehead hats as a fixture. During summer months, young Packer fans can bring bikes and have their favorite players ride them to the locker room, dating back to 1957. The Packers, of course, have some of the best fans in the NFL. Very proud of it. And yes, you can actually purchase the cheesehead hats as official merchandise. So That's something also interesting too about the Packers. We're going to be getting there as well. That covers a bit about the Packer history, of course. I don't think we're getting too far away from our next stop, which is Appleton Airport. We'll briefly stop there for our first leg. We'll get some rest, and we'll talk about the rest of the Packers when we get out of the airport. So, of course, I hope you guys are enjoying this Game Day Flight series. I do these every Friday. I hope you guys like them. Cover sports from all across the world. So, by the way, our next Game Day flight, if you guys want to know, will be on Friday. We'll be doing another NHL rivalry here as well. We're going to be covering the NHL once again. This time, we're going to talk about the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames. We'll cover the major rivalry in Alberta, Canada. So that will be covering next Friday. So we'll be covering this legendary historic matchup between one of Canada's more bitter rivals. The question: which one is the battle of two great goats? You either pick Wayne Gretzky and Connor McDavid or Jerome Iginla in the Flames. So should be really talk about, of course. And then 2 weeks, I decided for the next 2 weeks the Barcelona Espanyol game, as I want to do that one. That one would be pretty important. I did do Celtic versus Rangers, but if Celtic and Rangers keep disappointing, I'm going with the Barcelona derby. So I picked that one. We're gonna get ahead and get ready to get going, of course. So but yeah, the Packers, all sorts of stuff. They got community guides, shop, of course. And yes, you can purchase the official cheese heads. You can purchase one. So you or a piece of cheese on your head. Oh boy. So we're gonna go ahead and continue on this way to Appleton, of course, for our first stop of the day. Got some really cool planning on stuff to do, of course. In the Packers office. So in terms of some interesting things about it as well. In terms of other news, of course, for the Heisman Trophy, by the way, for another sports thing, Fernando Mendoza won the Heisman Trophy for the Hoosiers. So yes, he became Indiana's first ever Heisman Trophy winner. Honestly, Mendoza has more than earned it, considering he led Indiana to the unbeaten season. People thought Indiana was going to fall off this season. Instead, Indiana's become even better this year than they were last year. They now made the playoffs in back-to-back years. Kurt Singletti he's done the 21st century Bill Snyder, literally. The guy has been an unbelievable coach and has completely transformed the entire program. It's crazy. So I believe January 9th is going to be where the college football playoff is going to happen at the Peach Bowl. I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, for Indiana, it's just been. So I want to ask you guys an important question about the NFL and something. Do you guys consider the Super Bowl is February 6th, which is February 8th is going to be the Gameday stream. I'm definitely making the February 8th the Super Bowl. The question is, and I want you guys to ask for it. I'm thinking about moving. I'm thinking about doing a double Gameday stream on the week of the Super Bowl. Because I have another game that I want to do on the 6th, which is a rivalry in Greece. The Derby of Eternal Enemies, Panathinaikos versus Olympiacos. So I want to do a double stream. One on February 6th covering that game, and then on the I'll do a special Super Bowl stream covering this year's matchup, of course, in the Super Bowl, which is the season which this season, by the way, is going to be held in Santa Clara, which is closer to San Jose. Santa Clara is just a bit south, which is right next to San Jose. So I'm thinking about doing that. So I'll do GA for the flight in Greece. And then, of course, and then for the 8th, I'll take the PMDG 737 and we'll fly from whatever the NFC champion is, and we'll fly which one's the closest, and we'll make our way to Santa Clara. And we'll do it as a special Super Bowl Sunday stream. Cover all about the sport events and 2 teams in the road to the title. I think that would be really cool. And plus, that way I can do 2 game day fights. I can push back the national park stream just for a week. Maybe I'll compensate with 2 national park streams the week. I don't know. But that's just how I think. If you guys think that's a good idea, just let me know, okay? I'm just trying to think of an idea, of course. Because normally Super Bowl week towers over pretty much most other sport events. So I just feel like that's probably more important if I. Plus, I wanted to do something that a previous normal matchup gets overshadowed. So we're going to go ahead and make our land Apple. Steel Alpha Tango Whiskey. And this airport's actually a very fastly grown airport, too. Not my smoothest landing, but it works just fine. So, stop here for this bit. Chill. We'll stop right here for this bit. This is Applewood, Wisconsin. Appleton, Wisconsin. Stop here. If anyone wants to join on in, we're in the Southeast Asia server, and we're flying. So we're gonna go ahead and take off here soon. Bless you. Okay, bless you. We're gonna go ahead and get ready for the next leg, of course. We're gonna climb up to 2,000 feet for this next. And climb. And we're climb up and make our way down to Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Climb up 2,000 feet. To climb pretty high. We're going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about the Green Bay Packers. If once we climb to 2,000, we'll talk more about the Packers. So we're going to go ahead and talk more about the Packers. Of course, we all know about their massive fan base. Now, one unique thing about the Packers, of course, just as historic as the fan base and history, has been the branding of this club. The nickname, of course, the Packers, stems from the Indian Packing Company. Um, and the story goes when team founder Curly Lambeau solicited funds from his employer, the Indian Packing Company, in order to fit his new squad. He was given $500 for uniforms and equipment in exchange for the team being named for a sponsor. So the early newspaper article referred to the fledglings as the Indians. However, by the time they first played their first game back in 1990, they played as the Packers had taken home. Eventually, Indian Packing Company was purchased in 1920 by the Acme Packing Company and continued to support the team, which they played its first season with the Acme Packers emblazed on the jersey. So eventually, it later became known simply as the Packers, of course. Also, interestingly, is the team colors. While nowadays everyone knows that green and gold are the original, green and gold are the colors, um, have been the colors of the Packers. This wasn't always the case. See, Curly Lambeau is actually alumnus of the University of Notre Dame in South Bend. So he actually borrowed the Fine Irish's navy blue gold team colors, much as George Halas did when he borrowed University of Illinois' color for the Bears. The Packers were known as the Big Bay Blues. Of course, by 1950, the Packers replaced its navy blue with Kelly green. But kept what was then a lighter shade of gold. Navy blue was originally kept the secondary color on silent keys, but again, it was quietly dropped shortly after that. Eventually, this Kelly green was replaced in 1958 by Hunter green, and that is the color of the Green Bay Packers ever since. Since 1958, it's always been a combination of forest green and white jerseys with metallic gold pants. The Packers always have worn those colors ever since. Though occasionally some of the older throwbacks will feature the previous colors of the Packers. Of course, the iconic G on their logo for the Green Bay Packers was added back in 1961, actually, when Vince Lombardi asked Packers assistant manager Gerald Dad Brashear to design a new logo, and he tasked his assistant, St. Norbert College art student John Gordon, and he did the famous G, which is the shape of a football. Football shaped letter G, and the pair presented to Lombardi, who approved of it. According to the Packers tradition, and of course, the Packers actually hold a trademark to this logo and has granted limited permission for other organizations to use a similar logo. Mainly the University of Georgia, biggest one. So, as a result, the famous G logo has been a thing ever since. Yeah. Of course, that has been the team. Hey, Team Busy Bee, good to see you. Yo, good to see you. We're talking about the Packers and Bears rivalry today. We just flew over Green Bay on the first leg. We started back in Washington Island, and now we're heading our way. We went down through Washington Island. So our leg went like this. We flew over Washington Island in Door County. We got to visit some of the beautiful scenery there. Then we went to Green Bay, Wisconsin. And we flew over Lambeau Field, Green Bay, and we landed at Appleton. And now we're going to our second leg to Milwaukee. We're going to be talking about the rest of the Packers this leg, and then we'll get started with the Bears on the last leg. So right here, guys, is the city of Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Dead ahead of us is Oshkosh. Of course, all you aviation people should probably know about Oshkosh already. This is where AirVenture is held. The largest aviation festival in the world is held here in Oshkosh. But also, did you guys actually know that Oshkosh, Wisconsin, um, also once held an NBA team? Yes, an NBA team used to play in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Um, in fact, the Milwaukee Bucks had their development team here in Oshkosh. But if people didn't know, Oshkosh used to have a team NBA, part of the NBL, the National Basketball League, from 1937 to 1949. So pretty interesting stuff. So Oshkosh used to have basketball. This is Oshkosh. Little known Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So if you guys don't really know too much about Wisconsin, of course, it is Dairyland for a reason. It is by far the nation's largest producer of cheese. We did a whole 50 states and 50 stream series about it, so we all probably, hopefully you guys all probably aware of it. If you guys want to see that VOD, it's on my channel. Guys, I have a YouTube channel, and that's where I put all my VODs. You guys can get back up. Of course, to our left, to our right, and that's Whitman Regional. That is where Oshkosh is held. Imagine this place during the peak. It's actually crazy. Let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the Packers while we're down here. Of course, the Packers have had many major rivalries during their years of history. Of course, the Bears rivalry has historically been the most important rivalry. However, there's another extremely bitter rivalry the Packers have had, and that's with the Minnesota Vikings. And that rivalry with Minnesota is extremely intense. It's due to the fact the intensity of the matches over the years has been extremely bitter between the Vikings and the Packers. Plus, there's always this animosity whenever teams from Wisconsin and Minnesota meet up. Actually, if you talk about Minnesota and Wisconsin football, between the Golden Gophers and the Badgers, that rivalry particularly is extremely intense. This rivalry matches up even in the professional NFL setting. Of course, the Packers lead the series, but it's relatively close, 66-60. with 3 ties. And yeah, this rivalry is extremely intense. Packers and Vikings. They also have a rivalry with the Detroit Lions. Again, also an extremely old matchup, dating back to 1930, when the Lions moved from Portsmouth over to Detroit, and have been rivals since 1933. Of course, the Packers have been considered more dominant in this rivalry, 108 wins to 78 losses and 7 ties. So, definitely, though in recent years, the Packers have made it significantly closer, but historically, Green Bay has been dominant in the rivalry. They have a couple other league rivalries, but the most notable of their conference rivalries has been the New York Giants. It's Dallas Cowboys, and they faced off several times in league history. And some of the most notable games in league history are the Packers and Cowboys. Most notably, famously, the Ice Bowl that happened in 1967. Now, if you guys don't know about this legendary Ice Bowl game, I'll tell you a little bit of story about it was played on December 31st, 1967. It was the winner determined the NFL's champion to meet the AFL in the Super Bowl II. You had the champion of the eastern half of the NFL, the Dallas Cowboys, and the western champion, the Green Bay Packers. And they were the two-time defending champions in a rematch of last year's title game. It pitched the two Hall of Fame coaches against each other. The Cowboys had Tom Landry. Packers, Vince Lombardi. However, the unique thing about the Ice Bowl, and hence its name, is the climate conditions. It was they played at kickoff temperature. Kickoff was at a bewildering -13 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, -13 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't want to know how cold that is. AKA, it's also -25 degrees Celsius. It still is the NFL's coldest game ever. And it went down to the wire, of course. That Ice Bowl. Including the infamous block that happened of the famous block that led Bart Starr for the quarterback sneak and took the Packers to 20-17 with 13 seconds left to go, and the block became one of the most notable moments in Green Bay Packers history. Still one of the greatest games of all time, the good old Ice Bowl. Definitely one of the most iconic matchups in league history. Also a pretty well-known rivalry with the Giants. Of course, it's not nearly played as much as the other ones, but the Giants are another old rivalry dating back to 1928. They met for quite a few playoff appearances too, and even the 49ers as well in the 90s. But I put the Cowboys because, well, the Ice Bowl, that's pretty significant. But if you guys want to see Ice Bowl, of course, and wanted to actually talk about it, I think there's a whole video about the entirety of the Ice Bowl. Let me put the link of that game in the chat for you. So this is Ice Bowl. So that is the Ice Bowl in the chat. So there covers that game. It also heated up during other games in the 2010. But for our purposes, the Ice Bowl is the most important matchup in this rivalry between the Cowboys. Now, of course, their home stadium, and we visited already about Lambeau Field. So here's a bit more information about Lambeau. This stadium is the oldest stadium in the league, dating back to 1907 at City Stadium. It held that name until 1965, and in memory, where they renamed it to Lambeau Field after the founder of the Green Bay Packers and longtime coach Earl Curly Lambeau, who died 2 months earlier. As of right now, the stadium has a massive seat capacity of 81,000 fans, which makes it the second largest stadium in the NFL, only trailing AT&T Stadium in Arlington. It's now the largest venue in the state of Wisconsin, even bigger than Camp Randall in Madison. And it's the NFL's oldest continuous operated stadium, as they've played since 1957. In 2 years, um, it's gonna be 70 years old. In fact, in fact, the stadiums that, in fact, in terms of American sports, only two other stadiums have had longer active home field tenures than Lambeau, and that's the Red Sox at Fenway Park and the Chicago Cubs at Wrigley. That's it. Lambeau's been around for years. And of course, it's now on Titletown District, which is mainly entertainment, mixed-use developments. And the stadium even hosted the 2025 NFL Draft. So this stadium is absolutely crazy. Of course, the stadium has plenty of other names, including Titletown USA, the Shrine of Pro Football, and the stadium's most famous nickname, simply known as the Frozen Tundra. A lot of it was spawned thanks to the famous Ice Bowl game between the Packers and Cowboys that year. But of course, um, the Frozen Tundra. Of course, they had to do underground heat system and drainage in 1997 to keep the field warm during winter, of course. But but that nickname has stuck ever. One other interesting tradition here at Lambeau is, of course, the Lambeau Leap, which was popularized in the 1990s and was spontaneously created in 1993 by safety Roy Butler, who scored after a fumble recovery. Now, of course, the NFL banned excessive celebration 2000, but of course, like many things with the Packers, this was grandfathered into the rules. So definitely pretty cool. But yes, this stadium is definitely very special. And it's hosted other events too. Lambeau's hosted high school games, college games. It's going to host one in 2026. Lambeau is also going to has hosted some hockey matches, mainly with Wisconsin, and even concerts too. So pretty cool. Lambeau is absolutely an amazing stadium. Definitely one on your bucket list if you want to visit American football. Now, of course, is and finally for the last section for the Packers for this flight is of course going to be some of the legendary players. And it's not surprised with the Packers having this many Hall of Famers, with a franchise that has had so many legendary talents over its rich history. It's not surprised you can find all sorts of legendary Packers. After all, they have 30 pro footballers in the Hall of Fame. So, who do we pick? There's a couple of ones. The player we have a picture here is, of course, Bart Starr, who played for the club franchise back from 1971. He was definitely the quarterback during the legendary Lombardi era. In fact, he is the only quarterback in NFL history to lead the team to 3 consecutive league championships and has won the first 2 Super Bowls. He also had a coaching career with the Packers, though he wasn't nearly successful here. And he was a 4-time Pro Bowler, 2-time Super Bowl MVP. He won an NFL MVP back in 1966, 4-time All-Pro, and he is part of the 1960s All-Decades. And he also played college ball at Alabama, of course. Starr had the 3rd highest postseason passer rating of all time, and a postseason record of 9-1 in the postseason. So he's definitely a legend for the franchise, of course. So I had to obviously put Bart Starr on. Definitely an icon for the Packers. Next on the list is another legendary Packers quarterback, and the Packers again are known for quarterbacks. Then we have Brett Favre on the list. Now, Brett Favre was never drafted by the Packers. In fact, he was actually taken by the Atlanta Falcons in the 1991 draft in the 2nd round from Southern Miss. However, the thing that forever changed Brett Favre's career was he was when he was traded to the Green Bay Packers. Um, and of course, in that trade ended up completely changing his entire career because of his 20 NFL seasons, he played 16 of them with the Packers, and that's where he became a Hall of Famer during his time in Green Bay. He won three MVP awards, three straight MVP awards during his time in Green Bay. Yeah, he won three straight of them. He won a Super Bowl back in 1996, being the Patriot. Six-time All-Pro, 11-time Pro Bowler, a four-time NFL passing touchdown leader. He's part of the NFL's 100th anniversary all-time team, and of course he's also in Canton too. Brett Favre. Of course, nowadays he's probably not nearly had the same reputation, but Favre is an NFL legend, whether you like it or not. Of course, he did also lead for the Vikings a few times during his retirement. And guess what? As if the Packers weren't lucky enough to replace Brett Favre, is a guy who's going to probably make the Hall of Fame sooner than later. And yes, the quarterback I'm talking about next is Aaron Rodgers. Is of course Aaron Rodgers, and they actually drafted him back in 2005. But Aaron Rodgers is going to be a future Green Bay Packer Hall of Famer. He was drafted all the way in the 2005 draft at the 24th pick. Yes, entire teams passed on him. Yes, entire teams passed on him. And during his time in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers simply was just absolutely dominant as a Packer. Four-time MVP, five-time All-Pro, a Super Bowl champion back in 2010 season, four-time passer rating leader, two-time touchdown leader. He's part of the 2010s All-Decade team, and of course, Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Which is actually insane to think about how good he's the Packers. Then after the three legendary quarterbacks, how about defensive end Reggie White, who came from the Packers from the Philadelphia Eagles when he became a free agent. He chose the Green Bay Packers. He signed for then at the time a $17 million contract to make him at the time the third highest paid player, and he became a Packers icon. He's picked up 60 of his career 198 sacks as a Packer. But during his entire career, the dude is a 13-time All-Pro, 13-time Pro Bowler, two-time Defensive Player of the Year. He helped the Packers win a championship in 1996. He also was a two-time defensive. He also is part of both the 80s and 90s All-Decades team and part of the 75th and 100th anniversary All teams. But his time in Green Bay had made him an absolute icon. So definitely an icon for the Packers. Then you have offensive center guard Jerry Kramer. He was a big part of the ground game for the Packers with all their legendary ground attack. He born in Jordan, Montana, played at the University of Idaho. He was a big part of the five-time NFL champion during the Lombardi era, seven-time All-Pro, three-time Pro Bowler. He's part of the NFL's 50th anniversary all-time team. And of course, he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Of course, he didn't make it his way to the Hall of Fame until much later after his career. Of course, he did have a lot of injuries. As in fact, he was actually in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2018, which was long overdue for him to be. Then, of course, then he joined alongside was another iconic tackle, Forrest Gregg. He was inducted to the Hall of Fame back in 1977. Greg is a true Packers legend and three-time Super Bowl champion, including one with the Cowboys, five-time NFL champion, eight-time All-Pro, nine-time Pro Bowler. Of course, Greg was part of the 75th and 100th anniversary teams. He was also a coach for the NFL too. He didn't just coach in college; he even coached in the NFL, including even taking the Bengals to a Super Bowl one time in 1981. But Greg was definitely one of the all-time great offensive linemen for the Packers. And of course, you have Herb Adderley, the famous corner during that time. He is truly an interception artist. He played for Michigan State, and he played for the Packers and Cowboys. 23 Super Bowls, 5 NFL championships, 7-time All-Pro, 5-time All-Pro Bowls, and he's part of the 1960s decade. Adderley became an absolute menace secondary. Truly an absolute menace. And of course, you have Ray Nitschke, um, big part of the team. I could have also put Curly Lambeau, and I probably should have put Curly Lambeau. Of course, early Curly Lambeau was the founder of the team. But then you have Ray Nitschke, the feared linebacker for the Packers, and was the anchor of the Packers defense that helped won multiple championships. From 1958 to 1972, 7-time All-Pro, 5-time NFL champion, part of the 50th and 75th anniversary NFL all-time teams, and he is truly a legend. Of course, I then put Curly Lambeau, who's the founder of the Packers, the longtime player and coach of the Packers. He born in Green Bay and passed away at Sturgeon Bay. But he's been a 6-time NFL champion, 3-time All-Pro, and he's part of the NFL's 100th anniversary. Of course, he's the founder of the Packers. And obviously, his name has to be on this list. And of course, Charles Woodson as well, the famous corner who came to the Green Bay Packers back in 2006, and he put a legendary career that truly made him a Hall for the Packers, and that's what really put his career in the Hall of Fame. He is a 8-time All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler, 2-time Deception Leader. He won the Defensive Player of the Year back in 2009. He's champion, and in college he also had a Heisman Trophy as well. So Charles Woodson, a legendary career, definitely one of the all-time greats. And of course, there are many more iconic Green Bay Packer players to include for all you Packer fans out there. So that's it with the Green Bay Packers, everyone. Of course, when we land here in Milwaukee, we'll talk about the Chicago Bears for a bit. So don't worry, Bears fans, you guys won't be left out anytime soon. Bears fans like you guys will have plenty of time to get to go with the Braves. Don't worry too much, Bears fans. Boom, boom, boom. So we're getting closer to our final stop here in Wisconsin, of course. We're about to arrive our way to Milwaukee, of course. So we're going to get closer to Milwaukee. So basically, Milwaukee, for those who don't know, Milwaukee is the largest city in Wisconsin. Let me show you a little something too while we get our way to Wisconsin. So here's the Green Bay Packers website for the Packers. So from here, you can see a little bit about the franchise, of course. Got a little bit of previews and stuff. So you got the team for the player roster, of course, like all this sort of stuff. And there's some of your all-time players. Click here, you can look at all their all-time players, of course. So let's do Louisville. Let's see what Green Bay Packer players have played in from Louisville. Jair Alexander, most notably, has played from Louisville. Let's say Green Bay Packer player from Wisconsin. You look at all the players from the Packers who played for the University of Wisconsin. Go with the most games played for all of it. So the Packer with the most games played in from Wisconsin, Mark Tauscher. Pretty interesting too. In addition to here as well, you got a history thing. You can click on this and look at the history of the Packers, of course. Learn all about the history of the Green Bay Packers, the timeline how this franchise actually originated. You can see all the rich history of the Green Bay Packers. Here, all the different timeline, of course. You can also do internationally. The international fans, of course. So Packers International, they got different pages for international fans. They got one for Germany, Deutschland, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. So the Packers, the international rights, are actually now been awarded rights to Germany, Ireland, and the UK. So as a result, you see the Packers growing in those areas. Packers, Germany. So that, yeah, they got German language. They got some pictures for the Packers in Dublin. And of course, they got one for London too. It makes sense why they picked Germany though for the Packers, because if you ever know anything about Wisconsin and know about the state, Wisconsin has a rich German heritage. It's not surprising Germany got picked. Theirs got rich German heritage. Hey, Eco Costello, good to see you. It's been a while, Costello. We're doing our game day flight, Packers versus Bears today. So we got a community guide as well. We're mainly talking about the Packers, of course. Game day guide. You can press the game day guide away. So you can look for, you can watch details, watch the stuff, but of course you can also take the tour to see Lambeau Field. And if you're a big sports fan, you definitely want to check out Lambeau. In fact, you can now do Steam tours here. So click this. It's called the Hall of Fame and Stadium Tours, and you take the Lambeau Stadium tour. So you do the classic stadium tour, which is about an hour long, and you get to see one of Lambeau's previous areas, go down the team tunnel, and learn more about the organization and stadium of the Packers. There's also a special alumni tour guided by a Packer alum. And you have photo opportunities as well. You can do a Stadium Tour Hall of Fame combo to check out the Packers Hall of Fame. You can even do the Ultimate Tour as well with the trail trolley. Explore the area. But yes, there's a lot to do learning more about the Packers. So if you ever get your chance to do in Green Bay and love sports, you definitely want to do something with the Packers. It's a institution here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Of course, you can also do the you can also just get yourself a cheesehead too. So this here is Milwaukee. This city here, of course, is Wisconsin's largest city. Not really a surprise. Now the Packers, from what I know, used to play here every year from 1934 to 1995. They used to actually play in Milwaukee as part of their home slate. And the reason why was that County Stadium to be built to bring the Packers to Milwaukee. And in order for the Packers to grow out of their fan base in Green Bay, they moved to Milwaukee. However, the threat of an AFL franchise persuaded the Packers to stay in Green Bay. But of course, they played here from 1953 to 1994. Thanks to the improvements of the expansion of Lambeau, along with the Brewers playing in their new stadium, Packers moved to Green Bay full time. So this here, guys, is Milwaukee, of course. Now, one really cool thing about the city of Milwaukee, of course, is its rich German heritage, of course. A lot of German immigrants made their way over here and have influenced a lot of it. Of course, Milwaukee is home to some massive festivals, including Summerfest, one of the largest music festivals in the world. And there's also a big German fest here, the largest German fest in the... This here is Milwaukee. Downtown Milwaukee, of course, is also the home of Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson's from Milwaukee. I want to go ahead and turn right. So we're going to be landing at Milwaukee Mitchell for today. That will be our next stop. So we're going to go ahead and turn this back. Full landing. I hope you guys are enjoying this stream. If you guys like the stream, smash that follow and support the channel. We stream here Fridays and Sundays here on Twitch. I still need to get Flow Pro. I'll probably wait till after Christmas, of course. Oh yeah, Chase Plane's out. Chase Plane's officially out. So we're gonna go into Milwaukee Mitchell. We're going to land very soon. So I hope you guys are liking this sort of stuff too. So we got the Bears next. Which, if you know about me, the Chicago Bears, legendary franchise, of course. Of course, the Packers have their own fight song too. Go Packers Go is their fight song. Go you Packers Go. Dating back to 1931, yes, there is fight songs in the NFL. They're not as common as they are in college, but there are fight songs for the NFL too. And don't worry, the Bears have probably an even more famous fight song. So here we go. We're going to make our way now. We're finally down. This is Milwaukee Mitchell. Our second stop of the day here in beautiful Milwaukee Mitchell. So here's our route for today. Server. We're in Southeast Asia, by the way, so we'll just chill here for a little bit. Prepare for leg number 3, third and final leg of the course. So we're going to go ahead and get ready for our third and final flight. Let's go ahead and get the last leg flight. We're going to go make our way over to our last stop, and we're going to fly around 1,500 feet this last leg, of course. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, let's go ahead and make our final leg. We're going to head to Chicago at Merrill Meigs Field, of course. So as we climb up to 1,500 feet, we're going to head our way over to Chicago, of course. We're going to go ahead and talk about the Bears this week. Here it is, boys, the Chicago Bears. The other part of this rivalry, the Chicago Bears, founded back in 1920. They're one of the 2 remaining franchises from its original founding back in 1920, along with the Arizona Cardinals, actually, which also began in Chicago. So yes, the Arizona Cardinals are actually older than you think. They play their games, originally played their games at Wrigley Field from the north side through the 1970s. Then they played at Soldier Field, which is the current home of the Bears. And they were founded all the way in 1919 as in Decatur, became professional in 1920 and moved to Chicago the year after. Of course, the Bears have won 9 NFL championships for the merger of the AFL and NFL and a Super Bowl title in 1905. They hold NFL records for the most enshrinees, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and the most retired jersey numbers. Their championship and victories are only second behind the Green Bay Packers, of course. Their greatest period of success in the modern era was in the 1980s under coach Mike Ditka, winning the Super Bowl in 1985. They also appeared in their second Super Bowl in 2006, but they lost to Manning's Colts. Nowadays, the Bears have struggled to find success, winning their last playoff game in 2011 and division title in 2018. And during that time, the Bears had 23 different starting quarterbacks and 6 different coaches. So nowadays, it looks like things are finally looking up for the Bears because they're 10-4 this year. In 2025, a sale of a minority stake in the Bears was valued at $8.9 billion US. Of course, the club was founded by none other than George Halas, actually founded the club. The ownership of the club, of the franchise, by the way, is owned by the heirs of George Halas himself. Mainly, before her death, his daughter Virginia Halas McCaskey was the principal owner of the Chicago Bears. But she not only voted for her shares, but those of her 11 children and 2 nephews, who each own 3.8% shares of the Bears franchise, as well as the Brizzalara family, who own 8% of it as well. This effectively gave her 80% of the ownership stake, allowing her to control the team. The other remaining 9.2% was owned by former chairman and CEO of Aon Corp Pat Ryan and former Aon director Andrew J. McKenna, who owned the rest of the club. Of course, in 2020, Forbes reported that the franchise was around $3.5 billion, making it the 7th richest franchise in the NFL, and it makes sense as Chicago's are US's 3rd largest media market. Of course, nowadays with Virginia McCaskey passing away at age 102 and passing of Andrew McKenna, the McKenna family sold their minority stake to the McCaskey and Ryan families for $8.9 billion. So, yeah. So basically, the team is owned by the heirs of George Halas. In terms of the logos and uniforms, again, just like the Packers, they're also iconic too. They're equally as iconic. The Bears have had a few official logos throughout their history, but the first Chicago Bears logo was introduced back in 1940, depicting a black bear running with a football. And then the next logo, which was introduced a year after, was a navy blue bear on top of a football. But of course, in 1962, they unveiled what has now been the longtime main logo of the Chicago Bears, their trademark Wishbone C logo. Originally white with the black outline, this logo is incredibly similar to that worn by the Cincinnati Reds. Very closely resembled the University of Chicago Maroons dated back in 1998. This change in Bears logo was due to the addition of logos on helmets, which teams were added from the 50s and 60s. So this Wishbone C became a big part for the Bears for 50 years. And it only changed one time during 1974 to introduce color was added, changed to orange with a white navy blue trim. Of course, and this was the main logo for the Chicago Bears from 1962 to 2022, and eventually they made a new primary logo to the orange bear head, which was previously the secondary logo from 1999. So, however, the C logo is still retained on the helmets and at the 50-yard line. In terms of uniforms, of course, Steelers are originally for red jerseys with brown stripes. However, of course, the famous uniform the Bears have worn was dated back to 1949. But of course, one interesting change was when the Bears had worn various patches. But of course, there's one permanent patch the Bears have worn, which was worn after George Halas's death in 1983. They added a monogram-style GHH patch in the front of the jerseys, which later transformed into the the patch on the sleeves. Eventually, that is worn every single game of the Bears since in honor of its founder. Of course, as well, and that is the famous logo of the Bears. That is the logo and uniform of the Chicago Bears. Now, so of course, the blue, white is the iconic look of the Bears. In terms of the team culture, of course, for 2003, the Bears had two unofficial mascots named Rocky and Bearman. Rocky was a man who dialed a #1 Bears fan and carried a megaphone and started chants during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The other one, who was Bearman, was a season ticket holder who decided in 1995 he could assist the team by cheerleading. But of course, this ended back in 2003, and they introduced a new official mascot, Staley DeBear. Staley DeBear is the mascot of the Chicago Bears. And of course, his name obviously is to A. Stanley Starch Company, which founded the Bears franchise. Now, of course, one interesting thing about the Bears culture, if you notice one thing about the Chicago Bears, unlike many other NFL teams, they don't have cheerleaders. This makes the Bears really unusual. They don't have a cheerleading squad. They used to have one back starting in the 70s with the Chicago Honey Bears. However, when Hal's daughter Virginia took over back in 19 took over, she terminated them. And a lot of reason why she terminated the cheerleading squad was because she wanted the Bears to be all about blood and guts football and football only. And she thought they were sexist and degrading to women, and it cost them about $50,000 a season. So, however, some people think that the termination of the Honey Bears caused a bit of a curse, as the team is still yet to win a Super Bowl after the group's termination. So there is some sort of curse. So we don't know if it's really cursed or something else happened. So definitely pretty interesting. Now, of course, one interesting thing about the Chicago Bears that a lot of people don't realize about them is their rivalries. We all know the Packers, of course, is their big #1 rivalry. It makes sense. However, the Bears have several other rivalries. One with the Detroit Lions, having been faced since 1930. And the Bears actually led the series with 99 wins, 74 losses, and 5 ties. And grew even more since 1932 when they met in the first ever postseason game in NFL history. The Bears won 9-0. This game was also known as the first pro indoor football game as it took place in Chicago Stadium, which was indoor at the time, due to a blizzard. So yes, this is indoor football was actually first played in Chicago, funnily enough. They also have a pretty important rivalry with the Minnesota Vikings, though it's not as big of a deal, of course, which currently Minnesota actually leads the 60-54-2. Of course, and their last major rivalry is actually with the Giants. That's because the Bears and Giants have met in 6 different NFL championship games, more than any other matchup in both the NFL championship game or Super Bowl. And the Bears have won 4 of the 6 type of games, including the one in 1934. Also met in 2 other playoffs in 1985 and 1990, splitting each to a Super Bowl championship. Currently, the Bears lead that series 37-25-2. The Bears have had several major rivalries over the years, of course. But of course, if you ask most Bear fans, their number one rivalry is without doubt the Packers. Um, of course, the stadium they played is Soldier Field, and Soldier Field, by the way, was opened back in 1924, and it was reconstructed in 2003. It's been home of the Bears since 1971, as well as the Chicago Fire. Its capacity, though, is much smaller than the Lambeau. In fact, despite Green Bay being smaller of a city than Chicago, Lambeau has had almost 20,000 more people than Soldier Field, because Soldier Field can only hold 62,000 people, which is by far and away the smallest stadium in the NFL. It's also the oldest stadium established in the NFL and the third oldest in Major League Soccer. Um, in fact, in 2002, they had to rebuild the entirety of the interior of the stadium, which modernized it but lowered its seating capacity. And it also delisted Soldier Field from being a National Historic Landmark. It's also hosted many other sports teams. The Chicago Cardinals and Notre Dame football have hosted events here. And it even hosted the 1994 FIFA World Cup, as well as the Women's World Cup in 1999 and multiple CONCACAF Gold Cups. So this historic venue has been around for years, and it has all sorts of tenants. But the Bears haven't always played there. In fact, yes, much of the Bears' history, they actually played at Wrigley Field. Yes, the baseball field, Wrigley Field, which is the home of the Cubs. Which is weird because the Wrigley Field was built to be a baseball stadium. Yet they actually played in Wrigley. But still definitely feels weird to have Wrigley host football games. I know a lot younger people think it's still weird to have football played there, but nowadays they're playing. They used to play for the Bears for 50 years. But absolute crazy stadium though. Overall, definitely really interesting the fact the Bears played at Wrigley. Definitely very odd for a lot of people. And of course, when Soldier Field was under renovations, they didn't play at Wrigley Field or Chicago. You know where they played their home grounds at? That's right. They moved for one season to Champaign, Illinois. They played at Memorial Stadium in Champaign. So they had to literally play in the central Illinois for a season, which is pretty crazy to think about. The Bears played at Memorial Stadium for pretty crazy stuff, of course. Now, for the final part of the Bears and the final part of the slide or flash slide of, of course, of course I want to talk about the legendary Chicago Bears players. As one of the two oldest franchises in the NFL, the Bears have produced enduring legends that have lasted the test of time. Of course, the single most important person in all this is first person here is probably the single most important Bear ever, George Halas himself. Not only was he not only was he a star player for the Bears from 1920 to 29, he was also player coach of the Bears. In fact, he had multiple stints for the Bears from 1920 to his retirement as a coach in 1907. And not only that, he became a star head coach. He also is the owner of the Chicago Bears from 1920 to 1903. Um, but crazy enough, he was an 8-time NFL champion during his time with the Bears. 2-time Coach of the Year. He's part of the 100th anniversary all-time team, and he's one of the greatest Chicago Bears of all time. Pretty crazy stuff. He also served during World War I as an ensign, and he was part of the University of Illinois. he's had a legendary career with the Chicago Bears, not just as a player, but also as a coach and all that too. Outside of that, though, another legendary Chicago Bears legend and one very notable legend is Dick Butkus himself. Number 51, Dick Buck is one of the most feared linebackers in NFL history. And he was one part of the Chicago Bears monsters at the Midway, and he was the big bad. Played at Illinois, third overall pick in the 1965 draft, and he was one of the greatest and most intimidating linebackers ever. He brought fear into men. 8 Pro Bowls in 9 seasons, 5-time first team All Pro, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, absolute menacing player. He is a nightmare. In fact, he's the namesake of the Butkus Award for American football's most outstanding linebacker. And even still to this day, he was active in many charities and stuff after too. But his legacy as a Chicago Bear is not really a surprise. If you think of Chicago Bear and monster of the Midway, chances are Butkus is probably top of that list. Probably on top of that list. Of course, below him is another legendary Bear, and that is Walter Payton himself. He actually came to the NFL from Jackson State, in Jackson, Mississippi, of course. And he played all 13 years with the Chicago Bears. He was drafted 4th overall in 1975, and he received one of the most dominant running backs of all time. Won the MVP in 1977, won Super Bowl with the 85 Bears. And of course, he retired in 1987. Unfortunately, he passed away too young at 46 due to cholangiocarcinoma, which is bile duct cancer, unfortunately. However, he became a legendary player. And to say the least, MVP, 8-time All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler, 8-time All-Pro, MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Super Bowl champion, the NFL's 75th and 100th anniversary all-time. And most importantly, too, he's also the namesake of the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award. And basically, this award is dedicated to players' commitment to philanthropy and community impact. And the Walter Payton Award is the most outstanding offensive player, which makes sense. He's had an absolutely massive legacy. And he's been very charitable and all that, too. He's definitely one of the greatest players the NFL has ever had. The next legendary Bear, and one very iconic Chicago Bear, Dale Sayers. He came to the league from Kansas, of course, and he was absolutely elusive. Unfortunately, his career shorter than people would have wanted to, but man, when he was at his prime, Sayers was unstoppable. Elusive, agile, fast, possible to catch. The dude was NFL Comeback Player of the Year, 5-time All-Pro, 4-time Pro Bowler, led the league in rushing twice. He's part of the 50th, 75th, and 100th anniversary teams, of course. And he's the youngest player to ever be inducted to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, inducted at age 34. His nickname, of course, the Kansas Comet. He wasn't just dangerous, and not only was he an absolutely menace running the football, he was an extremely dangerous kick returner, too. He was also an extremely dangerous returner as well. Absolute menace for the Bears. Then after him would be, of course, Mike Ditka. Now, of course, he wasn't just a great player, he was also a great coach, too. He's also been an incredibly successful coach as well. As a player, he became one of the best tight ends in NFL history. In fact, he was the first time to ever reach 1,000 yards in his rookie season. As a player, how about a 5-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler? Even won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys during his time in Dallas, but he became a Bears legend, part of the 75th and 100th anniversary of that team. And as a coach, won the Super Bowl twice. as a coach. One as an assistant for the Dallas Cowboys, and the other one as a Bears head coach. Ditka becoming absolutely successful for both as a Bear and for both a player and coach. Of course, he also had a coaching tenure for Saints, but that was not really nearly as successful as a Saints head coach. Don't really talk about that too much. And after him, of course, Brian Urlacher, probably the greatest Bear of the 21st century. Brian Urlacher, number 54. Brian Urlacher came to the NFL from New Mexico and became a Bears icon. Urlacher was an absolute defensive nuisance. Played from 2000 to 2012. He spent his entire career in Chicago, 5-time All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowler. He was a Defensive Player of the Year in 2005. And of course, he's one of the 100 greatest Bears of all time. Absolute menace, and definitely not someone you want to face as a player. Then after Urlacher was, of course, Mike Singletary, the captain and leader of the 85 Bears defense. And absolute menace of a linebacker himself, came from Baylor, actually. And he was a big 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, a Super Bowl champion, 8-time All-Pro, 10-time Pro Bowl, part of the NFL's 1980s All-Decade team, and he's truly been a Bears legend. Of course, he was the heart of that 85 Bears team. And by the way, if you guys don't know about the 1985 Bears, it's probably considered to be one of the greatest teams of all time. 15-1 record with only one loss to Dan Marino's Dolphins. That was it. Everything else, they have completely destroyed people. And the reason why they destroyed everyone was because of that legendary defense. They only held 12 points per game defensively, which is actually insane. Actually nuts. Their defense has been absolutely dominant. And it's usually them or the undefeated 1972 Dolphins. Then some of the other players include Bronco Nagurski, star fullback and one of the retired players. You have Devin Hester, who is the most recent Chicago Bear to be elected into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's the most one of the more recent Hall of Famers. Devin Hester, the greatest returner of all time, kick returner. And of course, you have Sid Luckman, their all-time great quarterback, and many more Bears legends. Like, literally, the Bears have no shortage of legends to choose from. If you're a Bears fan, there's simply no shortage of absolutely amazing players. So, what I'm trying to say is that Bears fans, you have some really great players to pick. So we finally made it back to the mainland, of course. So this is Evanston. Now, if you guys don't know about this place, this is where the Northwestern University is at. Ryan Field. The team is currently being rebuilt. So they're going to build a brand new facility, of course, at Northwestern. So that is it with our Bears slide, of course. So we'll continue down this way, of course, with the we're getting pretty close to our finale, obviously. Our next stop is going to take us to Wrigley Field, the former home of the Bears, of course. The Bears. So one interesting thing about the Bears I do want to cover is the club's famous nickname. The Monsters of the Midway is the club's very famous nickname. And this was a reference to originally the Chicago Maroons, which was a reference to the Midway Pleistocene in the south side of Chicago. However, of course, most of us know the nickname is reference to the Bears, of course, mainly who won 6 championships between 1932 and 1936. Of course, the nickname was revived in the Super Bowl era to talk about the team's dominant defense, particularly the famous 1985 squad, Super Bowl 20. Um, and it made sense when you consider you have Hall of Fame, especially considering that Bears defense has many more Hall of Famers, though. Mike Singletary, Richard Dent, Dan Hampton, Steve McMichael. And of course, nowadays you had modern players with Dick Buckus, Mike Singletary, Brian Urlacher. The Bears have had some legendary defensive players. And one more thing about the 85 Bears in particular, that legendary team, of course. I mean, that team has had so many stars. I mean, this team's had multiple new Hall of Famers. Or even begin. Obviously, on the defensive side, you had Mike Singletary, Richard Dent, Dan Hampton, McMichael on the defense. And offensively, you had Walter Payton on the offensive side of things. You have multiple Hall of Famers. Jim Covert is also a Hall of Famer as well. McMichael, all the iconic Hall of Famers and stuff too. So now let's look to our right. So to our right is Wrigley Field. Now, and we all know it's the Cubs stadium since 1914. But people didn't really know the Bears used to play here from 19. The Bears used to play here from the 1920s all the way to 1971. Yeah, the Bears played here for 50 years. Chicago, of course. The Bears used to play in Wrigley for 50 years. Um, it's definitely crazy to think that the Bears used to play here at Wrigley. But it's true. The Bears actually played here. This is Wrigley Field. Home of the Bears. Former home of the Bears for 50 years. Here at Wrigley. Now, of course, one interesting thing about the Bears on the news is they're looking for a new stadium, obviously. Which shouldn't really be a surprise if you know anything about the Bears, of course. Over the last few years, they've been trying to look for a new stadium because Wrigley Field, because Soldier Field is way too small of a stadium for the modern NFL. It doesn't have a lot of great stuff, and it doesn't really have a lot of great facilities and stuff. So definitely very interesting as well. So we'll be making our way to downtown Chicago. Yeah, crazy enough that Wrigley Field once hosted the Bears. Now we're heading back to downtown Chicago. So this is downtown Chicago, everyone. Finally made it to downtown. This is downtown. We can see the Willis Tower ahead of us. Downtown Chicago's landmarks are definitely here. So we're about to get to Soldier Field for our last leg. So here we go, guys. Downtown Chicago. We're going to make our way here. So the Bears are trying to think about moving to a new stadium, of course. There was talks about the team moving to Indiana. Yes, Chicago Bears playing in Indiana. I wish I was kidding, but I'm not joking. I wish I was kidding. I'm not. That's 360 Chicago. There's many more famous buildings here. There's the Navy Pier. And Meeks Field is down over there. So we're going to pay a visit to Soldier Field first. We're going to go ahead and turn off autopilot. So Soldier Field is here. Of course, if you go a bit further north, you have the famous Field Museum, which is one of the best, some of the best public museums in the country. There's the Field Museum, and now here is Soldier Field. There it is, Soldier Field. There it is, Soldier Field, home of the Bears. Yeah, this is the smallest team in the league. Oh, yeah, that would be cool. By the way, I post this information to the Discord, so you guys are more interested in checking out. That here. So yeah, the new stadium was built right on top of the building, of course, with materials. We're gonna go ahead and set up the landing here at Meeks. Head to our left. Here we go, Meeks Field. And look at that. That's one of the reasons I'm glad Meeks Field's here, because we get to have really cool and oh, that's it, everyone. Welcome to Meeks Field, beautiful Chicago, right next to downtown. Just going to find it. Park right here. And turn everything off. So that's it, everyone. Welcome to Chicago, everyone. Meeksfield. So thank you guys so much for joining me on this Gameday flight this week. Hope you guys have had a great time learning more about the series going forward. So we'll be returning back to streamage on Sunday. We'll be covering our next national park, the beautiful Denali National Park in Alaska. So we'll see you guys then. Take care, everyone, and have a great start to your weekend. See you all soon. Goodbye, everyone. Take care.